Is Jake Paul good for boxing? I believe a lot of people think that he's not good for boxing and that he's a waste of time. Whatever he says is bullshit. And him calling out people like Canelo Alvarez. So it makes people think that this guy is a waste of time to watch. But however, even though he's a waste of time to watch, everyone is talking about him. And the people that say he is a waste of time to watch end up watching his fights to see him get knocked out, which increases, pay-per-view sales for him. I think he is good for boxing. There are people like Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua that say they say Jake Paul is good for boxing. So how can we say he's bad for boxing when professional boxers at the highest level are saying that he is good for boxing? Because MMA took over. Dana White and UFC, they took over the sport, and they took over boxing. Like, more people watch MMA than they watch boxing, and UFC has produced so many stars, and it just seems like boxing was dying until the YouTubers stepped up to have events. And now I was a boxing fan for a while, but now I'm like more into boxing after I've watched them. And like, I'm looking forward to watching Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk. I'm looking forward to the Deontay Wilder trilogy more so than I would have been if I didn't see these YouTube fights. And I think the newer generation has been influenced by these fights, and they're really entertaining, which has made them attracted and to the sport. And now some of them are going to their local gyms and saying, you know what, I'll lace up a pair of gloves and I'll start boxing. And who knows, like, the next champion could, like, let's say an 18-year-old right now, and let's say he becomes a champion at 27, 28, and they say, what got you into boxing? And he says Jake Paul and Logan Paul. That would be insane to think of it like that, because there are other boxers out there that are brilliant, but the audience that these YouTube creators have gathered together, their loyal fan bases, and now the fan base ends up getting entertained by the sport and influenced by the sport, and they start, they want to be a bit like their favorite YouTuber, and they start boxing because they think it's fun, and they get really good at it, and some of them can become champions. And like, this could really influence a lot of people, because boxing wasn't really putting the fights that people wanted to see, so the sport was dying because of corruption and all that shit. And these YouTubers have revived the sport. Now, Jake Paul, he talks a lot of shit, and he talks about Canelo Alvarez. Like, Jake Paul will never beat Canelo Alvarez. I know that. Jake Paul, deep down, I believe he knows that too. But him talking about fighting Canelo Alvarez will get a lot of people triggered, and they'll be like, you know what, this guy needs to get his ass shut up. This guy needs to get knocked out. So these people will end up talking about Jake Paul, because they're like, well, how is Jake Paul thinking that he's going to take on Canelo Alvarez? And then that is actually what Jake Paul wants. He wants more people to talk about him. He wants these boxing Instagram channels, the YouTube channels to cover him and talk more and more about him. The MMA community is talking about him. They all want to fight him. So if he was bad for the sport of boxing, they wouldn't even talk about him. They wouldn't bring him up. But he is good for the sport of boxing. As much as it sounds weird to say, he is good for the sport of boxing. And I actually want to see him win his fights because it's entertaining. If he fought KSI, I would want KSI to win. But if he's fighting these MMA guys, I actually want Jake Paul to win. I want to see how far can he get in terms of, like, he sold out some big stadiums. I want to see how far can he get, because he's not a boxer. I mean, he is a boxer right now, but he wasn't born a boxer. He wasn't training since he was 4 or 5. He was an influencer. And now just to, switch up career paths at the age of 22, 23, and only been boxing for 3 years, and he's already filling stadiums, I want to see if that might become the new thing. You might see people that want to become boxers instead of, okay, let's go to the gym and train every day. And, at 18, 19, we go amateur and then professional. They're going to be like, hey, you know what? I think we should start a YouTube channel. I think we should open an Instagram page to promote ourselves, because I think people are going to stop signing into organizations like UFC. As it continues, this is a controversial thing to say, but when you are like a lot of fighters are under contract and they're complaining about fighter pay, and then Dana White goes like, fine, if you don't want to fight, don't fight, we don't need you to fight. If you want to fight, fight. And then the fighter goes like, oh shit, now I have no choice because I need to pay my bills, I need to do all this shit, I'm under contract, so I'm only going to get paid, let's say, $50,000, not 50,000, $70,000, $80,000 for this fight, and yet I'm bringing a lot of pay-per-views. So shouldn't I be getting a piece of the pay-per-view sale? Shouldn't I be getting paid at least triple what I'm getting paid right now? I'm sure they would have those questions, but when they're under contract, you get paid the same amount for all the fights, regardless if you fight the champion or if you fight number 25th contender. In the ranks, you're going to get paid the same amount. That's what Sean O'Malley is saying. Why would he fight someone higher ranked when he's getting paid the same amount? For every fight, he can literally fight some bums. He can fight people that are nowhere close to him in his striking game and knock them out because he's getting paid the same amount. Why take a bigger risk? So I think when you sign under UFC and you're under contract, that puts you at a limitation. Whereas I think what they're going to do now is if I'm giving advice to someone that's new and wants to join the sport, I'll be like, start an Instagram page and start a YouTube channel. Don't like focus 80% of your work on that. Focus 80% on boxing, 20% of your time. Just think about your Instagram channel. It doesn't take much time. Your YouTube, just post a bit about yourself, get yourself a bit well known, and then you'll be able to fight in like undercards of influencer events. You'll be able to fight in undercards of Jake Paul's boxing fight. Like there were boxing champions fighting in the undercard of Logan Paul versus KSI 2, and there was female boxing champions fighting in Jake Paul's undercard against Tyron Woodley. So it's like you become a free agent and you know how much you're worth, so you can go and like, I think the private run events, the one Jake Paul, like all these opponents that have fought Jake Paul, it was their highest payday. And all the fighters in the undercard that probably weren't even any of the reason to buy pay-per-view, it was all because of Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley, they got paid their highest they've ever been paid. And those like Tommy Fury and some woman boxing champion who fought in the undercard, they all got paid their highest than in any other event, and it was in a YouTuber event. So you can do these type of stuff and be a free agent. And like how you see these boxing events, boxing legends where Mike Tyson fought and all that, try to get yourself on the undercard of those fights, and that will make your name a lot bigger. And you're a free agent. You can do this event, you can do that event, rather than being tied up to one organization and being under contract. Work on your portfolio and your profile, and that will give you the ability to fight in these different events, fight under YouTube events, because Jake Paul's going to keep doing events, Logan Paul's going to do an event, KSI might do an event, these YouTubers have events. Like, don't be a YouTuber, be a boxer. But like, let's say Ryan Garcia is the perfect example of it. Like, he is a boxer, he's always in the gym, but he puts time to post on his Instagram, he takes time to post on his YouTube. So like, let's say his boxing promotion and him had some dispute and he left, he could literally start his own event, and then there would be a lot of sponsors and a lot of eyes to watch it. So it's like, if you're under contract, you're basically handcuffed. But if you prove your worth, obviously you will get paid a lot more. After your contract ends, you get a different contract, like Adesanya, Khabib, George St. Pierre, all these fighters, Conor McGregor, they get paid a lot right now. But when you're fighting 6 fights, 7 fights, 8 fights, sometimes you don't get paid as much as then when you're later on in your career. But if you, and UFC, like, they won't pay you a lot until they see 6 to 5 fights of you being really good, and then you get a better contract. But if you have your own profile and you don't sign into this, you can literally have your own events. And if you have connections and Jake Paul starts an event and you go, hey Jake Paul, I'll be under your event, he's not going to say no. If you have a bit of a following, you will get paid more, and then you can just keep doing these events and building your name. Because I've seen a lot of UFC fighters that are struggling to pay their bills and all that, and it's like, you are killing yourself for a sport and you don't have enough money to pay your bills, it's insane sometimes. So it's sort of like, if you think you're worth more, don't get under contract of these organizations. if you're gonna have a dispute later saying that you're worth this or you're worth that. So rather not, build your profile and have your own events and just jump from event to event. Get on these YouTube undercards. A lot of people didn't know Devin Haney until he fought on that Logan Paul undercard. So yeah, that's my advice. That's why it's good for the sport of boxing. He's brought in a different perspective in terms of, hey, you know what? To become rich in boxing, I don't really need to sign under a promoter. I can become my own promoter. I can do my own shit. And if I have a good following, I'm not saying 7-8 million followers, I'm talking 30-40,000. Like, start at the bottom, obviously, and knock someone out and fight on these YouTube undercards that have millions of viewers. Whether it is illegally streaming, people watching, or the proper way, they're still watching you and they're starting to recognize you. So that's when your profile gets built up and you start to become more popular, because you're fighting on these big events. So when you fight on these big events and you make the calls, you're in charge of your own path. And if you have a bit of a following, you can get paid a good amount, higher than you would get paid at UFC for your first fight. And if you had a first fight with 40,000 followers and you fought on the YouTube undercard, you get way more eyeballs. So he's brought in a new perspective into the sport. And him for boxing, I think he's good. He doesn't beat these professional Devin Haney. He's not going to beat Lomachenko. He's not going to beat Ryan Garcia. But he will be able to actually take on a good amount of UFC fighters. He picks on the older guys, but they are experienced and they know how to strike. For 3 years, that is good. People don't take that in 3 years of experience fighting an ex-champion in UFC. So respect to him. He talks a lot of trash, but he's fun to watch. People want to see him knocked out. He hasn't been knocked out yet. And the question of will he get knocked out is the reason he gets so many viewers, because people want to see him get knocked out. People thought that Tyron Woodley would knock him out, and now people are going to think that Tommy Fury will knock him out. And we'll see. And that's why he's taking tougher challenges, and people are going to go like, you know what? Respect. You're fighting a professional boxer now. So yeah, I believe he's good for the sport of boxing. He's brought a new perspective, and yeah, I'm excited to see how far his journey can go, and will it be stopped short.